Welcome. I'm going to be talking to you about some of the lifestyle choices that are essential if you want to create a wealthy future and a wealthy lifestyle. Now, let me start by saying there are some assumptions I'm going to be making as I go along. One of them is I'm not dealing with wealth primarily from the point of view of material wealth. Now, I want to start by saying that there are three levels of wealth. It's important you understand this because I'm dealing with holistic wealth, which is complete wealth. Now, the three levels of wealth are, first of all, there's what we call spiritual wealth. That is the highest level of wealth. There's what we call mental wealth, which is just underneath the spiritual level of wealth. And finally, there's what we call physical. I call it material. Now, that is material wealth that leads to financial freedom, and that leads to you having enough in material form to be able to maintain the lifestyle that you want, and also to be able to keep you away from having to work for necessity, but perhaps working if you want to rather than because you have to. And so I'm going to be talking about the lifestyle choices you must have. Now, I use the word must, but in reality, this is not a one-stop shop. No one has all the answers. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the answers that I've been able to not only study, but I've been able to apply in my life, and I can see the benefits and the advantages of those. Now, the first I'm going to talk about is one that most people kind of shy away from. It's low maintenance. The first lifestyle you need is low maintenance. And I know what many of you might be thinking. You're probably thinking, I don't like the sound of this, but let me qualify that. You see, whenever we hear words, what we do very quickly is we associate an emotion or a feeling to that word. If it's a word we understand, then we know what it means. If it's a word that perhaps we've heard used a lot whilst they're growing up, or perhaps as part of our day-to-day activities, we automatically associate an emotion to it. Remember this, Shakespeare said nothing has any meaning, but your thinking makes it so. Nothing is good or bad, but your thinking makes it so. Now, by low maintenance, I'm not suggesting that you live like a pauper. I'm not suggesting that you live like the Scrooge from the Christmas Carol. What I'm saying is that the wealthy have an attitude. The attitude of low maintenance deals with three distinct areas. Now, when we think about low maintenance, we're thinking about you're depriving yourself of something, but that's not what I'm dealing with here. By low maintenance, I'm saying that you're dealing with an attitude. The attitude comes in three parts. Thoughts, in terms of your thinking. It comes in terms of feeling. And it comes in terms of your action. So let me make it more practical. By low maintenance, I'm saying you've got to live a lifestyle whereby you're allowing your attitude to be one of abundance. One that doesn't mean you deprive yourself of what you want because you're thinking you're going to lose it. I'll give you an example of what this really means in terms of how you can apply it to your life. Have you ever stopped and thought about how much time most people put into things that add no value to their lives? Now, let's start on the three levels. In thoughts, most people think too much. Unfortunately, the thinking is about worry. It's not really the creative thinking. It's about worry, fear, what could happen, what could go wrong. It was Albert Einstein that said that worry is the wrong use of the imagination. Now, if thinking is the most important activity that we can do as human beings, then we've got to make sure that we allocate that time for thinking to something that is good. Now, one writer says, whatever is pure, whatever is just, whatever is good, whatever is noble, think on those things. Now, most people spend a lot of time every day thinking about the economy. They think about what could go wrong. Some people perhaps buy liabilities. And this is where the wealthy and the average person differ. Poor people buy liabilities. Those liabilities create expenses, and those liabilities depreciate in value. The wealthy buy assets. The assets appreciate in value and create an income. Now think about this. The number of people who have bought cars, you have a desire for a car. Now I'm not suggesting it's wrong, but most people who are not financially free spend an enormous amount of time thinking about what could potentially go wrong. You buy the car of your dreams, and all along you're thinking it's parked on the road. Someone might bump into the car. You might think someone might steal it. Someone might key it. You might be thinking various things. All of that is taking so much of your time in thought. Now, what the wealthy do is they live a low maintenance lifestyle. And therefore, what they spend their time doing is investing and acquiring things that don't distract them. See, anything you have or own that is consuming a huge amount of your time, energy, emotion, effort, thought, I don't think it's an advantage to you. I think it's a disadvantage to you. Now think about this. Warren Buffett still lives in the house he bought back in the 1950s. Now he's the second wealthiest man in the world. He's worth just over 76 billion, but he's still living in the house that he paid for. I think he bought about 32,000 or 31,000 he paid for the house. He still lives there today. Why? It has nothing to do with whether he can afford something bigger or something nicer. It's just low maintenance. Now, someone once said that maintenance diminishes your joy. Let me give you a good example. You have an idea about the best car you want. You get the car. Then you realize you've got to pay, every month you've got to pay extra taxes. Every month you've got to pay, the loan amount is much bigger than you probably initially anticipated. Every month you've got to now pay extra insurance, maybe because the car is not kept in a very safe, secure location. If you live in London, perhaps you don't have a driveway, so you have to park it on the road. That increases your insurance. You're thinking, well, could something go wrong? All of these things take away a lot of your thinking time. The wealthy create more wealth because they allocate their energy in the right way. And wherever your energy goes, that's where you create your income from. In other words, your focus follows your energy. Wherever your focus goes, energy flows. Now, if you move your focus away from wealth creating opportunities and you're worrying about all of these things that perhaps don't add any value to your life, all of which in many cases are just fear. What is fear? Fantasized experiences appearing real. Some other people say false evidence appearing real. If you channel all of your energy in that direction, what you're doing is you're robbing yourself of the opportunity of really creating better ideas. You see, what you have is an imagination. The most powerful gift you've ever been given. You've got to use it creatively, not destructively. So I would say low maintenance is not about what you have in terms of possessions. It's about living a life whereby you don't have to keep worrying about things. So I want you to buy the house of your dreams. I want you to buy the car of your dreams. I want you to go on the best vacation. I want you to enjoy life because it's a short life. But anything that robs you of a healthy, wealthy state of mind is probably not worth having. So remember what I said at the start. Wealth is on 3 levels. Spiritual wealth. I'll give you a good example. If you're in fear, you cannot be in gratitude at the same time. You cannot be grateful and fearful at the same time. The two do not go together. Because if you experience gratitude, which is the highest level of you expressing your spiritual wealth, someone once said, gratitude is the key to wealth. It's not really the key to wealth. Gratitude is simply a process of you expressing your true nature. Your true nature. And the more you express your new true nature, the more grateful you are, the more you draw closer to the real source of everything in your life. Now, some people call that God. Some people call that infinite intelligence. Some people call that divine energy. Doesn't really matter what you call it. But the more grateful you are, the more you draw yourself to the original source. And the closer you come to the original source, the more you get to a level of what we call knowing, understanding. And that is you expressing your true nature. At the spiritual level of wealth, you have what we call love. Love is who we are, and we've got to express it. Now, it's impossible to be in a pure state of love, expressing love, and be worried and be fearful. You see, anything that takes you away from that spiritual state of love, abundance, giving, something you should walk away from. Now, you might indulge in it, but let it not be consistent. Now, the number of people who every day allocate all of their intellect to fear, worry, all because they don't have a low maintenance lifestyle. Now, I've talked about thinking because thinking is the most important thing we do. What about feeling? You see, what you think about controls how you feel. So many people have all of these thoughts, and these thoughts are controlling how they feel. Now, if you go and you look at a lot of people who, maybe not, this doesn't apply to every wealthy person, but those who have actually arrived at the level of complete wealth, they can walk down the streets, dressed in shorts, and they're happy. They're very relaxed. They don't have to keep up with the Joneses. They don't have to dress in a certain way to be acknowledged, because they understand that the material level of wealth is the lowest level. And they don't need affirmation or confirmation of other people. They know who they are. So what I would say is your feelings, if you have the right feelings, it will lead and create an aura, an atmosphere of attraction. Now think about this. The law of attraction works, whether you believe in it or you don't. Ignorance of the universal laws does not diminish the existence of the laws. The law of attraction is always working. If you're thinking good thoughts, you're attracting good thoughts. If you're thinking negative thoughts, you're attracting negative thoughts. If you have negative feelings, you're attracting negative feelings. Similarly, if you have good feelings, you attract good feelings. And so, always ask yourself, my lifestyle choice, is it attracting what I want? Simple question. Now, your feelings have to be expressed, and your feelings are expressed through your actions, what you do. Now, my recommendation to you is this. Sit down and ask yourself, how do I use my time every day? How do I spend my money every day and every month? But more importantly, how am I spending a lot of my spare time in terms of thinking and feeling and action? Do I have a low maintenance lifestyle? Now, that doesn't have anything, like I said, to do with material possession. You can have the best, mansion, the best cars, the boats, the yachts, everything. But are you living a low maintenance lifestyle? Now, if you had all those things, and here is how I summarize before I move on. If you have all of those things, and they control your thinking, your feeling, and your action, then they own you. But if you have all of those things, but you don't worry too much about them, then you own them. Now, someone once said, if you can give your money away, then you're master of your money. If you can't, then your money masters you. It's the same principle. The low maintenance lifestyle is not about what you get. It's about how you live. Now, I'll always say, freedom comes in two parts. You've got to be free in time, you've got to be free in money. But I want to take it a step further and say, you've got to be free in your heart. This is free from the fear of worry, the fear of doubt and concern, the negative things that we all attract. So, going back to the ancient book, and the ancient writer says, whatever is good, whatever is noble, whatever is just, think on those things. Because what you think of and how you think decides how you feel. How you feel will be expressed through your actions. Your actions will, if repeated, will come to what we call habits. Your habits, over time, will influence your character, your behavior, and your attitude. And these ultimately shape the results you have in your life and your destiny. So, the first habit you must have is a low maintenance lifestyle. Now, I spent some time on this, much more than I thought I would actually, so I'm going to move very quickly as I talk about a few others. The second one is my favorite. It's my favorite. It's something I have a passion for. It's a continuous learning. Now, I think learning is sacred. I think if you commit to the lifestyle of continuous learning, you change your life. I think it's so blessed. The fact that every day we can grow, not just physically, we can grow emotionally, we can grow intellectually, every day we can grow spiritually. I think that is sacred in itself. And I think if you can commit to the lifestyle of consistent and continuous, never-ending growth and improvement, you have a phenomenal life. Unfortunately, the average person stops reading at a very young age. You know, walk around London and you stop people and ask, how many books have you read in the last 12 months? In so many cases, you're going to really get a very blank stare. There's a second category of people who read. And Londoners, I've got to say, they read. Compared to any other place I've lived in or I've been to in the world, Londoners read because we have a transportation system where people just sit down on the train, on the bus, and they read. The trouble is, a lot of people are reading entertainment books, fiction. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm one of those people that I like to say that there's something called the EE ratio. The EE ratio simply says that one is education and one is entertainment. And there's going to be a ratio. Entertainment is great because you need that to recharge your body, to recharge your mind, perhaps to relax, but you've got to educate yourself. Reading a lot of what I call sensational stuff. I'm not suggesting a lot of the books are, but reading a lot of the sensational stuff in magazines and newspapers, it's like putting mental candy into your mind. Your mind needs mental food, and that mental food comes through good study, by reading things that inspire you, things that educate you, things that inform you, enlighten you, help you develop the best gifts that you have, things that motivate you. All of those is what we call mental food. The more you study, the more you get better. And continuous learning is the second lifestyle of the wealthy. They have an obsession about learning. Why? Because they understand a simple principle. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Meaning, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Now, William James said that whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. That's a powerful statement. In other words, it simply means everything you have in your life, you create from your thoughts. So, if you go back to the 3 levels of wealth I talked about, spiritual, mental, and physical. At the mental level, everything you have in your mind, your thoughts, will be transformed into what we call reality. Now look around where you are right now. Just look around. Do a 360 look around. Everything you can see with your natural eyes began in someone's mind as a thought, as an idea. They developed that idea into a concept, and over time, they worked on that and finally became a reality. The wealthy understand that wealth is created first in your mind. Wealth is a product of financial wisdom. Financial wisdom comes through study and application. Knowledge in itself is incomplete. You have to understand the knowledge. Now, information has to be transformed to knowledge, but it does that only happens through study. Now, once you have information, now you've got to comprehend the information you have. You need understanding. To get understanding, you need study. So wealthy people spend a proportion of their day, every day, learning. Here is my recommendation. I believe that this learning process should be such that you should invest between 5 and 10% of your time every day learning. Let me show you how, because I know some of you are probably thinking that's too much. 5%, when you consider that you have 24 hours every day, 5% is equal to about 1.5 hours. 10% is about 2.5 hours. I don't think that is too much. Think about it from this point of view. A farmer goes through his field and he gathers his harvest. But he doesn't eat all of the harvest, because part of that harvest is what we call seed corn. Now think about this. The only reason you have food in the supermarket is because the farmers made a decision to hold back a portion of what they harvested. They sold much of it, but they've kept back some. And that's the reason why during the seasons, you always have maybe sufficient stock of your favorite apples and bananas and fruits. The reason is simple. Now, I know in some countries they import them from various places, but the reason is because the farmer takes a portion of his seed, now that could be 10%, doesn't really matter, and he puts it back into the soil for the next season. Because if he consumed all of the seed created from the harvest, there will be nothing for the next season. Now, in the same way, you've got to see yourself as a farmer. Every day you get 24 seeds. And all I'm asking is that you take 10% of that seed and reinvest for the next season, the next day, the next future. Everything you have will come as a result of the level of your personal knowledge, development, and understanding. Now, you might be thinking, I have too much to do in a day. I cannot make this happen. I'm going to show you how. I'm going to show you how I did it in my life and how I think anyone can do the same. It's not difficult. It's, in my opinion, it's easy. It's easy. This particular area of life, it's easy. There are a lot of things that I would say, are simple but not easy. But with this, I would say it's easy. It wouldn't require a change of your lifestyle. But also, I can show you how you can do it and you can enjoy the process. So, the second habit you must have is continuous learning. The discipline of continuous learning. Now, continuous learning is simply education. This simply means choose the areas of life that you want to get good at. Now, let me give you something to think about. When I talk about continuous learning, I'm not dealing with a particular area. There are 4 areas of education. We have what we call academic. You learn how to read and write, basic. So you learn that, you never have to do it again for most people. You have professional education, which is you learn how to do a job. Now you have a job. Some people don't actually spend any more time studying, but you have to, because the only way you get better is through study. Some people say, well, I have 20 years of experience, and we say, well, do you really have 20 years of experience, or do you have 1 year of experience doing the same thing 20 times? Unfortunately, if you're not growing in your business, in your line of profession, you're moving back, because nothing in life stays the same. Well, you're either growing or you're dying. Nothing stays the same. So you have to keep growing. But there are 2 other parts of the education system that most people do not understand, and this is where the wealthy capitalize on. The average person spends all of their attention focusing on education from the point of view of academic education and professional education, but that is not enough. That will not make you wealthy. It doesn't get you wealthy. What this will give you is what we call a job. A job simply means you're just over broke. You cannot find security, rather freedom, from a job. All you would get from a job is security. And the more you go for security, the more you walk away from freedom. If you want to be wealthy, you have to ask for another level, which is what we call personal development, which is you learn how to set goals. What you're doing now is you're listening to a video or recording about how to improve your life. That is personal development. You've got to invest in learning some of these skills. We call them life skills. You learn how to perhaps develop a better time management or time leveraging advantage. You learn various things about life, how to develop courage. You develop ways of how to build your dream, how to improve your self-image. This is all personal development. They're very important. Now, you might be thinking, I don't need that. I'll say something to you. Do you know that more people get fired from a job, not because of their professional ability or inability? They get fired because they don't have personal skills. They can't keep time. They can't work with a group or as a team. They don't have sales abilities. They're not really good with clients. They have an attitude problem. They're not team players. These are all skills that were rarely taught in school, and you have to learn through educating yourself. Now, we call the top half of this table formal education. We call the bottom half of this self-education. Now, guess what? The self-education comes in personal development and it comes in financial education. It's possible to be technically brilliant. It's possible to be intellectually sound and still be financially illiterate. I used to be that way. And it's only lately that I've been learning a lot more about money, the rules of the game, how to create money, how to protect, how to share, how to leverage, how to multiply. That all comes from financial education. And so the advantage the wealthy have over the poor is because the wealthy keep increasing their knowledge. The poor, on the other hand, sadly, hold on to an obsolete lifestyle or education, and they protect it with a vengeance. And unfortunately, as a result of that, they don't grow. Most people say the poor get poorer because the wealthy are stealing all the wealth. Well, it's not that. You see, money is attracted to wisdom. Money is attracted to wisdom, and therefore, because the wealthy continue to learn, the money is attracted to them. Now, if you want money, increase your wisdom. It's really that simple, and you do that through study. So what you need is a complete package of learning: academic, professional, personal development, and financial education. So continuous learning is key. Now, I said I was going to give you, a short overview of how you can invest every day, the 5 or 10%. I'll tell you how I did mine. It was very simple. It was very easy. Every day, I knew I had so many responsibilities. And by the time I got back home from work, I was exhausted. I was tired. It wasn't the right time to start studying. Because if you're really going to study personal development and financial education, you've got to concentrate. You've got to have focus. You've got to focus your mind in such a way that you wanted to get a specific result. It's not just about passing time. You want to have the specific outcomes you desire. And every evening I was tired. I just couldn't do it. So I made a choice of either following traditional ways of learning or adopting a new approach. And all I simply did was I made a decision to combine my learning process with what we call audio learning. Now, audio learning is called, it's kind of said it's like the eighth wonder of the world now. Before you had to read a book. Well, many books now are in audio format, making it easy for you to study. So one of the things I did first of all is I used to sleep for about 8 hours every day, but I was poor, I was broke. And one day I sat down and I said, I haven't deserved 8 hours of sleep. I'm struggling, I'm financially dependent. I'm clinging on to job security. I don't have any leverage. If something were to go wrong, I'm in trouble, I'm stuck. I have one single line of income, and it's a point of failure because it's a job. If the company would decided to sell or merge with another company and made my position redundant, I would have nothing coming in. That inspired me to make a change. And so I decided that I would, rather than sleep 8 hours every day, that I would take 1 hour. And I would wake up early in the morning every hour, every morning, and I would invest 1 hour in my education, in my financial education, and in my personal development. And I would study ways of creating wealth so that I could start creating multiple passive income streams. That was the first way I did that. And then I realized that that 1 hour was still not up to 5 to 10%. It was still less. So I decided that I would combine my travel time with learning. How? I spend roughly about between 2 and 3 hours traveling to and from work every day. Now this goes back a few years. And so I decided, why don't I combine my travel time and some of my leisure time with learning? The first thing I did is I decided that I would get audiobooks, inspirational seminars and webinars and recordings from some of the greatest minds in the world. And I would put them on my phone, and whenever I was driving, whenever I was, walking down, I had my headphones on. Rather than listen to sensational news and things that were not really adding value to my life, I decided that I would spend half of the time. Now, you've got to get the balance right. I'm not suggesting that you discard what you enjoy doing. I'm saying you just simply make room for more. So what I did was I decided that I would spend half of my travel time studying and half of my traveling time just relaxing. Again, we go back to what I said before, the E ratio, education, entertainment. Now, by just investing half of my time, I found that I was spending about 1.5 hours whilst traveling, I was studying. And when I added that to 1 hour in the morning, that was 2.5 hours. So by the time I got to work every day, I had invested, and I had already invested my 10%, which is about 2.5 hours, in my education. So the rest of the day I could now spend doing whatever I wanted to do. Now that's kind of cool. That meant when I got back in the evening, I didn't have to sit down and start studying. It didn't have to happen. Now, as time went on, I got so passionate about learning, and I started looking for ways to increase that time without changing my lifestyle. And so what I decided to do was continue with the process, but instead, whenever I went to the gym for exercise, whenever I went for a walk, whenever I went for a run, I would have 2 sets of information. One of them was music, something inspiring, music, various genres of music, but also I had something to study. And so what I would do is I would spend half of the time as well. So for example, if I went for a 30-minute run, I would always start with music because I needed that mental boost, to get me going. And by the time I ran for about 10-15 minutes, I would switch to education. Mentally, I was there. I was running. My adrenaline was pumping. I had all the various parts of my focus, dedicated towards what I wanted to do. So I could then switch and start learning. And I did this over a number of months, and I found that it was quite easy. So when I go to the gym nowadays to do some exercise, what I do is if I run to the gym, because the gym is not too far from my house, if I run to the gym, I listen to music. It's nice, it's fast, it's beat, it feels cool. When I get into the gym, because I'm already pumped, as I'm about to start working out, I do some education. I listen to some learning, some inspiring information for about 15-20 minutes. By that time, because sometimes you've got to be honest, let's be very honest. A lot of this education and learning, sometimes it's not really, it doesn't get the juices flowing because you're studying. Now, you can't study fully and pump iron. You're thinking about, pushing those weights. So I'll do it for about 20 minutes and then I'll switch back to music. I'll pump myself up again, get my inspiration, move in a certain way, and then my emotions come back, and then I'll switch back to learning for another 10 minutes. So over the duration of going out for a workout, I would invest about half an hour extra in learning. So every day I started investing a little bit more. Now you can do this for yourself however you want to. Perhaps your lifestyle is different. What about when you're preparing a meal for the family? If you're alone in the kitchen, why don't you just put something in the background and let it just be playing, that you don't have to listen with complete focus. The information will get into your mind. Now you can tell that I have a passion for learning and wisdom, and I spend a lot of time on this. So I'm going to move on very quickly, but let me conclude by saying this. The level of your success in any area of life will seldom exceed your level of personal development. It's not about wealth. This applies to every area of life. Relationally, the best relationships, the absolute best relationships are those that are founded on wisdom, not love. Love doesn't make a relationship work. Now, some of you might be listening and thinking, he didn't just say that. Now, think about this. If you go and meet people who are about to sign the divorce papers and you say, do you love each other? One of them would say, I used to love him, I used to love her. What happened? I fell out of love. It's just an emotion. The right relationships that survive the test of time are those founded on wisdom. Understanding the next person. Now, how do you understand someone else? You study them. You learn about them. You learn how a man thinks. You learn how a man interprets information. You learn about a woman. You learn about, how to talk to a lady, how to be gentle, how to show compassion. You learn about intimacy. Well, my mum never taught me any of these. Now think about this. You cannot give what you do not have. It's a fact. I love my parents. They were amazing people, but they only gave me what they had. And I took what they gave me, and I'm grateful for that. But the mistake we make is we assume that that's enough to have a really fulfilled life. No, it needs study. So you've got to learn a few things. I've got to learn how to talk to people in a company, how to talk to clients. The best relationships, business-wise, are those where the client feels that they're getting the best service. They feel as though, their needs are being met. It's no different from relational with friendship or intimacy. It's all the same, but it comes through study. You got to learn. And that's why wisdom is so important. I got to stop now. Let's move on. I can get so excited about this. I could talk about it for 7 hours. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is another quality. It's opposite to what I just talked about now. And some of you might find that to be uncomfortable. It's a word we don't like, but I'm going to deal with this because we're talking about the truth. Someone once says, the truth will set you free. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. But first, it might piss you off. And I find for so many years I struggled. And part of the reason I struggled is because I operated on ignorance, pure ignorance. And one of the reasons for my struggle was because every time I heard something different, I would always ask myself the question, is this consistent? This information, is it consistent with what I already know? Is it consistent with my beliefs? Well, that's the wrong question. Now, you might be one of those who you perhaps relate to what I just said. That's the wrong question. The right question should be, can this information help me achieve my goals? Can this information push me and propel me in the direction of my dreams? And I always say to people, if the answer is yes, welcome the information and use it to prosper. If the answer is no, run away from the information. So if anything I'm sharing with you here will not help you achieve your dreams and goals, you have my permission to discard it. But similarly, if it will help you, please use it. Now, the third quality is what we call frugality. Ooh, that's the big word, the F word. I just mentioned the F word. I can't believe I used the F word. I found most people, when they hear the word frugality, they have a negative emotion. I don't know why, but let me explain what I mean by frugality so you understand. By frugality, I'm not saying that you're living cheaply. No. By frugality, I'm simply saying you understand your priorities and you're channeling your resources towards your most important priorities. And you walk away from things that are not very important. It's really that simple. Frugality, in my opinion and in my definition, is not the definition in the dictionary. Forget that definition. The person who probably put it there is dead. He had their own beliefs, philosophies, and I don't intend to adopt exactly what they believed in. Frugality, in my view, is simply, am I using my resources in the right way? In other words, By making the right decisions about your entire life, you might have to make subtle changes in the present to allow you enjoy the future you want. Frugality is not you saving and penny pinching. No. I'll give you a good example of what I call frugality. There's a reason why the poor and the wealthy have almost an opposite lifestyle. It comes down to a simple principle. The principle can be found in a formula. The formula comes in two parts. There is the formula for wealth and there's the formula for poverty. The formula for wealth says that the wealthy earn money. When they earn, the first thing they do is they invest. Once they're done investing, they spend, but they spend using a budget. So the first word I'm going to put here is B, because I'm going to come back to that word. And then once they're done spending, because they spend with a budget, they create a surplus, extra money. The extra money is then intended to be reinvested because they're always thinking about, how do I reinvest? I'm going to come down to another word, C, meaning if you want to be wealthy, you must be a compulsive investor. It's a must. You might say, I want to be a compulsive saver, but you must be a compulsive investor. My recommendation is invest, don't save. You must also have a budget. This is the formula for wealth. Now, the wealthy do not save actively. By that I mean they don't save for the long term. They save passively with the intention of reinvesting because they understand that the purpose of money, see, many of us are saving money in the form of a currency. Now, if you understand what a currency is and what it's used for, one of the things you realize very quickly, and this I understood from my engineering profession because we did physics, current means movement. Movement. In electrical engineering, we talk about current. The current flowing through or passing through a device is movement. If you have no movement, then the power in that currency starts to diminish. In other words, money has to keep moving. If you hold on to the money for too long, it loses value. Every economy, every business needs cash flow, meaning money has to go out, money has to come in. That extends the life of the business, and that's how every economy is built. And that's the reason why some economies use debt, because they've got to keep moving money. The poor, on the other hand, use a different formula. They earn, interestingly, the same amount is earned by both parties, but the poor, the first thing they do is they spend. When they're done spending, they save what's left. Now, I can talk about both because I've experienced both sides of the coin. I talk about intelligence as a coin. And intelligence is found in standing on the edge of a coin, not the sides or the heads or the tail. Stand on the edge. Because when you stand on the edge, you can look at both sides. And it was only when I got to the point where I moved myself from being in the poverty-stricken side of the coin to standing on the edge that I could see the advantages of using some of the wealth principles. And the question is, can you hold both ideas in your mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function? Most people can't. Frugality comes in because, in my opinion, the poor and the wealthy earn the same amount. But the first thing that the poor do is spend. The wealthy invest. That's why there's a difference in lifestyle. So most people say frugality because, and most people that talk about frugality are normally those who are not wealthy. You would never meet a wealthy person who you say, I pay myself first, I invest first before I spend. And they look at you in a negative way. They look at you like, that's brilliant, because they know that's how you create wealth. The poor, on the other hand, when you say you've set up a budget, when you say you're investing first, they think about frugality. They think about you're depriving yourself of something that you deserve. Now, the difference is simply in vision. The wealthy are thinking about taking that part of what they earn and sending it into the future. So that when they arrive in that future, it has interests, it's grown, and it's much more. The poor, on the other hand, want to spend it now. So for that reason, most people say frugality from the basis of you're depriving yourself of something. Now, this is going to lead into my next lifestyle decision you must make. The point I'm making is this. What do you do first? Now, the ancient Babylonians were very wise and also very wealthy. And they came up with a phrase. They said a part of what you earn is yours to keep. They said, pay yourself first. Take a portion of what you earn. It could be 10%, it could be more, but take a portion of what you earn and let that portion of what you earn become an expense so that it goes away first before you start spending. Now, in the days when I used to apply the poverty-stricken formula, the problem I had was after I earned, I spent. But I had very poor money habits, so I spent everything that I earned and more. And that meant that I had nothing to save. So I would go for 3-4 years and I had nothing. I had worked for 3 years. That's almost 1,000 days, or more actually, because there are 365 days in a year. I would work for almost 1,000 days and I had nothing to show for all of my hard work. I had given everything away to other people. Now the poor subscribe to that lifestyle. Unfortunately, the credit card availability and consumer lifestyle almost lends us to live in that way. The wealthy, on the other hand, invest. Once they've invested, it means they now have to live on a budget. Now, what is a budget? It's a plan. So when most people talk about frugality, they're saying you're living on a budget, you're not enjoying life, you don't know how to live well. The wealthy are thinking about the future. Now, if you think in days, if you think in weeks, if you think in months, you're going to remain poor. If you want to be wealthy, you've got to start thinking in decades. You've got to be thinking about the next 10, 15, 30, 40, 50 years, and even beyond your life. You've got to be thinking about the people behind you, your family. You've got to be thinking about the community. What can I do for them? You've got to think ahead. Dream big, think ahead. Now, let me move quickly to number 4 as I slowly start to bring this in for a landing. Number 4 lends itself very nicely to what we just talked about, and that is the discipline of delayed gratification. Now, this is a biggie. This is a big one. And the reason it's a big one is because instant gratification is one of the core reasons why most people will remain poor, and many people will remain in a safe, secure job for the rest of their lives working for money. What is instant gratification? Is simply that desire you have in you to have it now. You walk past a shop, you see a dress you like, what comes to your mind? Now let me qualify that very carefully so you understand. If you're not wealthy already, then you potentially have instant gratification issues. Now, if you're wealthy, the wealthy and the rich can walk past the shop and they see something they like and they buy it. No problem. They're not penny pinching because they can afford it. But the reason they can afford it is because of all the disciplines they've had to endure over a long period of time. They've now created wealth and they're living the life they want to. They keep expanding their means and they keep earning more. If you're not wealthy or financially free, the possibility is that you do not have great ability to delay gratification, meaning you see something you like, but you discipline yourself not to react emotively. Remember, wherever your focus goes, your energy flows, your emotions go. So I usually say to people, there's nothing wrong in wanting more. Let me make that qualification. I think that the desire for the good life was put into each and every one of us when we were born. It's a quality that we have. You cannot be saved from it. I'm going to digress for a minute. I'm not a scholar, but I'm going to digress and I want to bring in a story. Whether you believe in it or not, doesn't matter. But I want to use this story as an example because I think it lends itself well to what I'm about to say. You've all heard about the story about Adam and Eve in the garden. Now, according to the storyteller, the story says that both of them were instructed not to eat of a fruit. Now, the fruit they were instructed not to partake or eat of was a fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, according to the storyteller, it says that the person who tempted both of them tempted them on the basis that if they ate the fruits, that they will become as wise as God himself. Now, the first time I read that, I thought, well, hang on. For them to have proceeded and eaten the fruits, it meant that the desire was already in them. The desire for more, the desire for growth. Remember what was tempted, they tempted them by, that you will become as wise. That was the appeal, meaning they had a desire for increase. So I believe every one of us who has a desire for more, I don't think it's something you should be ashamed of, because we must keep growing. Growth is one of the most essential parts of life, and you should grow in every area of your life. You walk past a shop, you see something you like, that's natural. But you need discipline, because you've got to learn how to channel your desires in a way that it supports your vision and goals, not hinders your vision and goals. So I'll give you a classic example of what I mean. Most people who are financially dependent spend a lot of time and energy and money buying things that I would call liabilities. Now, liabilities are essential. I should qualify it and say that there are good liabilities and there are bad liabilities. So I'll give you a good example. A good liability is your home. If you have a mortgage and you have a home, your home is a liability, it's not an asset. That simply means every month you have to pay for expenses, maintenance, insurance, and paid mortgage. So every month, a liability is something whereby after the original capital investment, it causes money to flow away from you as an expense. That's a liability. An asset, on the other hand, is something whereby after the original investment in capital, it increases in value and it causes money to flow to you. That's an asset. So there are good liabilities and bad liabilities. Bad liabilities depreciate in value and they cause an expense from you. Good liabilities increase in value, but they cause an expense from you. So just understand the difference. But most people spend a lot of money on and energy on liabilities, things that don't really add value to them. They might give you the feeling of comfort in the present. They might make you feel important, make you feel sexy. You buy a nice dress, a nice shoe. That's all well and good. But in 2 months, in 3 months, the feeling goes away and you want the next thing. The difference is if you can delay gratification, then you have one of the qualities for creating wealth. Because wealth is really an emotional game. By that, I simply mean you've got to learn how to manage your emotion. Wealth creation and investing is an intellectual game. It's an intellectual game, meaning you've got to keep your emotions in check and allow wisdom to be the foundation for making decisions. But you've got to understand how to manage emotions. So one of the things I normally say is this: if you see something you like, give yourself 24 hours to test that emotion. What I've found from my experience is you see something, you want it really badly, but after 24 hours, you don't really want it. Why? Because your focus has shifted. And over time, you've tested that emotion and it's not really there. Now, if after 2 days, it's still there, then by all means, go for it. However, this is how the wealthy get wealthy. They also have liabilities, but what they try to do and what they focus on doing is they buy assets first. And then they use the assets and the income generated from these assets to buy their liabilities. I'll give you a classic example. A number of months ago, years ago, I had a need to raise a certain amount of money, but also a need to raise that money on a consistent basis for something. It was a liability, no doubt. I had a choice. I could either just pay for it. There was no urgency in terms of having it immediately. What I decided to do was find an investment, put the investment put the money into an investment asset, and I had to wait for about 7-8 months before that investment started to grow. After about 12 months, it started to produce cash flow. The cash flow it was producing, I started to take that cash flow and I channeled that cash flow into buying a liability. I'll give you a good example of how this works in principle. You walk through a showroom, you see a car that costs about £100,000. You like the car, it's attractive. Perhaps maybe this is an Aston Martin DB9. It's a beautiful car. It's red or black, whatever. You love it. You really love it. You want it. Let's assume, on the other hand, you can afford to pay for it. Let's just say you just have enough to pay for it. Let's say perhaps you have a saving of 120,000. Now, instant gratification is, do you go and buy it? Because a car is a liability. That's a fact. If you drive this car out of the lot, ride down the street, and in 30 seconds you drive back and you hand them back the keys and say, no, I don't want the car again, I want to sell it. You can only buy this car roughly about 75, maybe between 72 and 75,000. So it's lost about 25% of its value in less than 2-3 minutes. And that's because it's a liability. It depreciates in value. And in addition to that, it's going to cost you an expense every month. Now, if you're financially wise, what you might decide to do is take this £100,000, for example, find an investment. I'm going to talk about the investments I have a knowledge about and that I'm involved in. Let's say real estate or property investing. If you have £100,000, you can use leverage or other people's money. By leverage, you can go to the bank and the bank will give you £400,000. You add £100,000, which is your money, that's £500,000. You buy an investment property for £500,000. You rent out this property, it could be a commercial office or a residential building. The property starts to produce cash flow. Let's assume in this case that this is producing a cash flow out of the £500,000 you've invested. Let's just say that it's giving you a cash flow of about, in this case, let's just say, net cash flow is, who knows, maybe about £10,000. Let's use that. Annually. Let's just say £10,000 annually. Meaning that you're getting maybe roughly about £700 per month. Something like that. It's very easy to get that as well. What you can do, think about this. What you can do, someone who's financially smart, what I would do is I would allow that asset to sit there. I'll keep getting the cash flow. There are two ways of appreciating an asset in value. It can do that passively, it can do that actively. Passively means that the demand-supply economics applies. Maybe it's in an area where there's a lot of demand, and maybe over the last 10 years, the property has increased by about 6% in value. So you can automatically calculate and see, well, what will my property be worth in 1 year or 2 years? Now, the traditional way of doing it is that you wait for about 2 years, because if you took out a mortgage, you may have taken a fixed mortgage for 2 years, meaning you can't do anything within the 2 years, you've got to wait. At the end of the 2-year period, now you can make changes. Now, if the property has increased in value, which it would have if it's in a great location, if it's around places where there's a demand for and there's availability of jobs and education, what you do is you go back to the bank, you say to the bank, well, listen, my property has increased in value passively, but in addition, I've done some active measures. I painted the house, I put a new garden, I made some changes internally. So overall, it's appreciated in value. Now, this is where it's so beautiful. Let's assume that by active and passive means, this £500,000 property in 2 years has increased and it's now probably worth 750,000. Let's just assume that. The bank originally gave you 400,000. So the bank will be willing to give you 75% of the difference between the new value and the loan. So we're talking about 350,000, 75% of that, meaning the bank will be more than happy for you to have about 200,000 withdrawn from that property. Obviously, you've got to look at the numbers. Make sure that what you're now paying in the refinance mortgage payment per month, you're going to be able to get more than that in terms of income, that your tenants can still pay for it. So you do some adjustments. The point is this. By playing around with the numbers, you can pull out your original 100,000. You can pull out the original 100,000 in 2 years. Very easy, very easy. The property will continue to cash flow money to you. You're still making profits every month, income, which is coming every single month. You now have a property that is still appreciating in value. Now you now have a choice. You can take that £100,000. Remember that the bank would have been willing to give you over 200, but you just take £100,000. You go to the showroom and you pay for the car. The balance of the £100,000, you put it back in your account and look for the next deal. So in 2 years, what has happened here? You've delayed gratification for 2 years. At the end of the 2 year, you have a car. The same car you wanted, maybe a better model, but you also have the £100,000 that you originally had. And you have an asset that is producing income. And this is infinite because someone pays for all the expenses and you still have a profit every month. Now that's powerful. On the other hand, you could have decided, well, I don't even want to pay for the car because the car reduces by almost 25% of its value. So I'm going to loan the car. What do? This £700 you're making every month, you go to the showroom, you say, well, can I lease the car instead? But you do it in a smart way whereby you put this under a business. This is all about financial education we're dealing with here. So forgive me that I'm putting out various parts and you're probably thinking about, what does this have to do with instant gratification or delayed gratification? It's the principle. Follow the principle. You can go back to the showroom and you can pay maybe $650 every month for the car. The $650, someone else is paying for it, your tenants. Meaning you don't even pull out any money from the house. Or you pull out this £200,000, no problem. But now you have £200,000, you go back to the bank and you say, I want to buy another property. The bank says, okay, we'll give you 4 times the amount, or 75%. You bring 25%, we give you 75%. So the bank offers you, this time around, they offer you 800,000. You buy another property worth $1 million. That's how the wealthy get wealthier. So in a way, you're eating your cake and having it. But it begins with instant gratification. The question is, can you wait? Now, this doesn't apply in every area of life. Let's not get that wrong. There's certain areas whereby, you've got to live. But the point I'm making is, if you're buying liabilities that depreciate in value and cause an expense every month, then it's worth thinking about twice. And don't react emotively. Always give yourself about 24 hours or 48 hours before you make an important decision, especially a decision that is really influenced by emotions. Now, I hope that that's been useful. Let me draw this to a close because I've spent some time with you, much longer than I thought. I hope what I've shared with you has been useful. Number 5 is the final. I'm going to try not to spend time on this. This is what I call your neighborhood. You're probably thinking, what does this have to do with wealth? It has everything to do with wealth. Where you live has a major impact on whether you become financially free and wealthy. Why? Because when you choose a neighborhood, you also choose a lifestyle. If you're in the habit of keeping up with the Joneses, you want to look very cool. Let's assume perhaps you have a job, but you want to live in the most affluent part of the city. No problem. This is all a choice. What you find, and what I try to educate people on, is the fact that in the places where you have the best houses and the most expensive houses, a lot of the people who own the houses there bought those houses when they became rich. Many of them bought the houses when they were wealthy already. So they were still applying the same principle of living within or below your means. To them, they may have bought a property for 10 million, but maybe they have a net worth of 100 million. But most people, especially in my age group now, we want to be like, we want to look like, we're trying to act like we're wealthy, but we're not. So we're paying a premium to be in a place which we cannot really afford. When you choose a location or a neighborhood, you choose a lifestyle, because now if it's an affluent place, especially if it's an affluent place, you've got to dress the part. You can't go to the cafe without, dressed in a certain way. You've got to drive a certain type of car. The pressure to just be like other people becomes much more. And we're very, very interesting people. Human beings are very interesting. We want validation. Unfortunately, the sad thing about validation is in many cases the people it's coming from don't really care about you. So here is the point I'm trying to make. If you're spending more than 30 to 35% of your net income in a rented flat, a rented house, or your mortgage, it's an indication that you don't have great financial education. Discipline yourself not to spend more than 30 to 35% of your net income on your home. But in addition to that, the reason you're doing is because you want to be able to allocate some of your net income towards investing. So I would recommend this. You choose where you want to live. It's a choice we all have to make. But just remember that where you live, the home you choose to live in, affects whether you become wealthy. My recommendation has always been live within your means and then keep expanding your means. As you expand your means, increase your lifestyle. But don't go trying to be wealthy. Don't try to act wealthy when you're not there yet. Because for every time you're trying to act like someone you're not, you're simply taking away all that energy and effort and focus that you could have channeled towards becoming wealthy. And in my recommendation, I think sometimes if you begin with those who are humble and start in the right location, they get elevated. In London we have this attitude. Most people and many people in London spend between 50% and 60% of what they earn net in terms of where they live, simply because they're not willing to perhaps travel away to somewhere that is 30 or 60 minutes down, and they can get maybe 3-4 times the same size. Rather than pay this much, they would only pay about 30 to 35%, and then they can channel that 30% left towards investing. And this applies to everyone. So I would say your neighborhood is robbing you, if you're not careful, is robbing you from a life that will be difficult to express or explain, a life of abundance, a life of prosperity and riches and happiness. Your neighborhood is stealing from you, and you may not know. So if you want to be wealthy, you've got to start to think about this quality that I've shared with you, and ask yourself the question, am I good at delaying gratification? Am I good at being frugal in how I use my money? Am I continuously learning? Do I have a neighborhood that I live in that supports my vision? You see, anything that doesn't support the vision you have is robbing from you. They're stealing away from you. It's distracting you from actually fulfilling that vision. And I don't mean to perhaps, be negative, but this goes together with instant gratification. Those who are faithful with little things will be made rulers over much. Meaning, the wise man once said to his disciples, to be the greatest, you have to be the servant. Meaning, you have to be willing to serve other people. Start at the low position and work your way up. Why does Warren Buffett still live in the same house he bought in the 1950s? That only cost about $32,000. Why does he still live in the house? He lives in the house because he likes it. It's not about what other people think. Now, I bet you, if you walk down the street and you saw Warren Buffett, he probably wouldn't be dressed like someone who is the second wealthiest man in the world. He'll be dressed the way he wants to dress. And that is the point I'm trying to make. When you choose a neighborhood, especially if it's a neighborhood that is affluent, you've got to be careful. A lot of the people who were there perhaps bought those houses when they were wealthy, or they bought the houses before the properties appreciated in value. And so you're not comparing apples with apples. Never compare yourself against someone else. Always ask yourself, who am I comparing myself with? Is it me or is it the next door neighbor? Everyone is different. And yes, you need to be in a location that inspires you, that is interesting, that is nice. But if you're faithful with little things, then you will be made ruler over much. Always my mom used to say, cut your coat that cut into your size. And that's such a simple philosophy about life, which simply says it's all about you. If you're going to choose a high, really expensive neighborhood, let it be because that's what you want. But let it not be at the expense of a much better life. Now, I hope that's been very useful. I hope it's been informative. I want to wish you the best, whatever you choose to do. Like I started off by saying, no one has all the answers. I've given you 5 lifestyle choices. There are probably about 25 I can give you, but because of time, I can't give you all of it. I'll say this to you though, invest in your mind. Keep studying. If you've listened to this all the way through, then you already have the seeds of greatness in you. You just have to keep planting that seed and planting that seed, and eventually that seed will start to create a harvest, and that could be the turning point that starts to change your life. I want to wish you the best. God bless.